Woo! Yes! Episode 2. Filming, recording, before even having the stats of episode 1 of A Dacetacular Mind. I'm Chris Dace, and we're going to dive further into me as a person. And I figured since last week's episode was what I would like to call heavy, and I don't know how heavy is when it comes to me. I'm a heavy person. You know, I'm over 300 pounds easily. But I know last week was what I would consider a heavy episode because there's a lot of serious source material there that I thought it'd be fun this week to go back and look at my original run in old-time wrestling. Now, many of you may be familiar with my run in old-time wrestling from like 2013 to 2015, I think is when I finally bowed out. I'm on my third run now, but mainly as just a character, not an actual wrestler. But I had big dreams in 2009. And I did sign up at the Monster Factory when they were working hand in hand with Old Time Wrestling. They're two separate entities today. But at the time, they were one. And I thought that'd be a fun topic to discuss. I don't know how people received the first episode, which kind of talked about 2019 to 2021 and where I am mentally and why I'm doing a podcast about me. Again, it seems super arrogant to be the guy that talks about yourself. But hey, if Kurt Angle and Jeff Jarrett and all these guys who have had very successful careers can talk about themselves, why can't a guy who has existed in that same time frame as their careers talk about what they did during that time? Sure, I wasn't winning gold medals or I don't know what the hell Jeff Jarrett was doing. I should probably listen to the Jeff Jarrett podcast. I just figured it'd be fun to talk about what I did in the past. And mainly because it's going to be fun trying to remember that first run as it was over. Oh, I'm going to put a number to it and it's going to hurt my soul. But, 12 years ago? Oh my. And I could tell you for a fact, when I signed up, who I was with, who I talked to, I remember that meeting vividly. And I look forward to talking about it. But I also want to just point out, like, this is going to be the way the show runs. I'm going to do some heavy episodes. I've got some lined up where I'm going to talk about some tough topics and where I stand on those tough topics, whether you care or not. And not that my opinion means jack squat. I'm one guy of, like, billions upon billions of people on this planet, so my opinion isn't that monumental to the point where it's going to move countries or cause people to storm the Capitol. And naturally, I feel like, as I do with everything, this isn't a Dace Man thing, this is a Chris Dace thing. Chris Dace is addicted to Monster. I just think it's going to be fun to talk about stuff I did. And just essentially shooting the shit with a screen that hopefully correlates to somebody listening to this on a Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday or whenever you listen to this. I think that'd be fun. So I want to talk today on today's episode. We did a heavy one last week. We talked about how I went crazy, how I was severely depressed. And this is going to be an episode where I was still fairly innocent. Pie in the sky dreams, thought I was going to make it to the WWE, realized I'm not athletic, so the WWE was way out of my reach, but I feel like it helped with character development. So in 2009, to place this, in my personal life, I have just gotten back, it was 2 years ago before that, I was in Savannah, Georgia, which will be a story for another time, where I was going to college, and I lasted 9 months. So, like, you know, the run of a baby inside a womb. And came back. And I'm back at the company I started working at in 2003. So now it's 2009. And before I signed up, I was a receiver. I had not yet been promoted to a supervisor level. I don't know if I'm going to get into details when it comes to my work life because I still work at that company. And I'd rather not go down that path. But professional-wise, I wasn't traveling yet, and that'll happen and pretty much put the bow on my first run with OTW because I started traveling so much, and I was spending most of my time in Montreal and just couldn't make training sessions. And not being athletic, you really need those training sessions. Doesn't matter how well you can speak, or if you're quick-witted, or you have a good character. Old-time wrestling didn't focus on that. Old-time wrestling focused on wrestling, and those guys are really good wrestlers. I was not. I still am not. I like to think I'm a good character. Probably not, I know I'm not the best character, but I did have a good character. And essentially, this was probably the start of the Daceman as we see him every Tuesday now. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So I'm going to kick it off, and I can tell you it was May of 2008. Yes, May of 2008, I want to say it was. And I signed up at the Monster Factory. I could tell you I wrote a check for the full amount for training. I don't know if anyone's ever done that. I was committed. I was all in. I took... There was two things that were happening simultaneously. It was basically like, look, Savannah, Georgia didn't work out. You're coming back to New Jersey, and you're not meant to be a corporate guy. Flash forward to 12 years later, you're a corporate guy, still with ambitions to not be a corporate guy. But 2008, 2009, I really hit the ground running of just, I'm going to be something that's not college driven. And it's just because I enjoy performing for people. I love putting on a show. I love being in front of cameras. I love talking. I love, especially live audiences. There's nothing better than it doesn't matter if there's two people watching you or a auditorium or arena filled with people watching you. Eliciting a reaction out of people, that's fun. I don't care who you are. The adrenaline rush for that is probably just as good of a high as anything else. That being said, 2008, I had just freshly gotten back from Savannah, Georgia. I went down there in the fall of 2006, was back in the summer of 2007. Did not work out for me. Not a fan of Georgia. Not a big fan of those kind of peaches. And it was just time for me to, get back to what I was doing. And that was nothing. I had no idea what I was doing. So, fast forward 12 years, still same situation. But I had aspirations to perform. So I came back, when I was in Savannah, I was doing acting classes. And again, we'll talk about Savannah at a different time. But it's important to note that during this entire thing, I was still trying to act. I was still trying to do theater performances. I was when I came back from Georgia, I was going to GCC, which is Gloucester County College, which is now an extension of Rowan. Working with their theater program. Did a few plays with them. Did a Midsummer Night's Dream, as well as Karaoke Killer. All of it, like, I was very active, which in hindsight, like, I've slowed down in my age. But I was super active. I was on the stage, I was wrestling, and I was doing this thing called commercial acting. That is some good stuff. I wish it was sponsored by them, because there's apparently an aluminum shortage, and it's very hard to find my Red Ultra Monster. If you're listening, Monster Energy. So, here I am. I want to say it's 2008. I make the conscious decision of, I'm going to wrestle. I've watched it. I've loved it as a kid. The entertainment factor of it is alluring to me. And I take out a loan. I was like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to pay to the Monster Factory, who has had people pass through it. If you're a fan of the product today, Damian Priest was there when I originally signed up. He was going by the name of the Punisher, or Louis Punishment Martinez. He was there. Rhett Titus was there, or was doing a few shows there. If you're a fan of ROH, the Mecca, Brian Johnson, he was there. Mick Drake was there. And these are guys that were just starting. I started along with Craig Nash, who was in this area at the time, and good friend of the Dace Man show. And it was an interesting theory, because again, you look at what they do on TV, and as an outsider and an innocent one of that, and probably gullible and got just so naive, you think you're going to get to that real quick. Not the case. All your stars of today, the majority of them, especially the ones that are over with fans, have spent years doing what I could not and would not, unfortunately. But I remember the place was in Belmar. It was right off of an exit off of Route 42 in a warehouse. There's some kind of other company in there now. It was a dual company of Monster Factory, which was the training company, and then OTW, which was Old Time Wrestling, and that was the promotion where, as you trained and you worked through your training classes, you were put on that show in some capacity. When I signed on, I was in the room with Jim Monolou, who is a former ECW referee, Ed Atlas, which was a very colorful guy. I don't want to get too much into him as a person, but I've never met another Ed Atlas, we'll put it that way. And then my friend Victor Straub was there with me, and we fell out of talking a couple of years ago, but he was there as I signed, and I paid full tuition to the Monster Factory, to Jim and Ed, and was just like, let's go, let's do this. And Victor was there for that moment. And at that point, I was ready to rock and roll. I didn't start that night. I came back the next night for training. I remember there was 2 nights a week that you would do training. You pay your dues. Anyone will tell you that, regardless of where you sign up. And paying your dues has different meanings based on whatever company you work with. There's going to be 2 instances. We're talking about my first run with OTW in about 2008, 2009. Actually, it might be 2007, 2008, 2009. And realistically, that discussion, that experience there in the Belmar facility will be completely different than when I return in 2013 and start from scratch, which I'm glad they did that with me. I needed that. I'm not good. I'm going to be upfront with that. I am not a good athletic wrestler. But there were 2 different experiences. So the experience I had in 2007, 8, 9, I really forget the years, but that experience to me was different. And I really think this was probably 2008, 2009, because I was on a path in my professional career that had moved away from laborer to I was being pushed into management, and then eventually I get put into the support roles of IT side of it. So I get further and further away from that tougher work that people do. And we did a lot of that because the thing that people don't understand about some of these smaller promotions. I went in and I paid full tuition up front, but that's usually not the case. So a lot of people will pay in payments, and they have to pay for promotions. They have to pay to bring in some outside names to kind of push the card a little bit. They got to pay for the bills, the facility, the ring maintenance, all that stuff. It factors into bills. So as part of quote-unquote paying your dues, you do a lot of work around the ring, the establishment, the promotion, self-promotion, and you do all that because ultimately you're pushing yourself. I mean, if you come to an arena and the arena looks like shit, pardon my French, it's a reflection on you at the end of the day. So a lot of it was you keep your house tidy. And that's what we did. That was part of paying the dues. And not to mention, then that would be you're doing that after 2 to 3 hours of balls to the wall training in the ring, running the ropes, which, let's talk about that. The first time you run the ropes, man, your back is not experienced or conditioned to do that on a normal basis. And that first night, your shoulders are sore, your back is sore, and there are just rope marks across your back. And I remember this because they tell you, but you don't know until you do it. And running the rope is an art form in and of itself. There's timing to it. There's positioning to it. If you don't position yourself well, you're going to hurt yourself. And there's a lot of credit that should be paid to these guys. Again, I know this because I did it, and I know this and appreciate it more because I wasn't good at it. Which is like, it's weird. You're listening to a podcast and a guy talk about his sports entertainment, professional wrestling intro into that world, and just be like, I was ass. I was the worst of the worst when it came to it. I wasn't made for it, which is disheartening in hindsight, but to have that experience and to actually try, it was great. Like, and we're going to get to that first match and how amazing it was, even though I was bad. But the whole running of the ropes in and of itself is a hell of an experience. I'm not coordinated. As a person, I have lived in the same house for almost 2 decades, and I still clip this wall that has been there since the house was built because I just don't take a far enough step to the right. I will clip this thing. I'm talking 2021, probably this morning or yesterday, whenever you're listening to this, I probably clipped it because I'm not coordinated. I'm an uncoordinated bastard. So running the ropes is all coordination. You have to spin your body at the appropriate time. You guide yourself with your right arm to hold the rope, because God forbid you mess up and you don't hit the rope appropriately. At least you have a grip on something so you just don't go head first over the rope backwards and kill yourself. And then you have to pivot and go back. Like you're springing off the rope to return. It's not you're hitting the rope to stop. It's very rare you do that. I mean, it happens, but for the most part, and I apologize, I'm taking a drink because I'm so excited I'm drying out my throat. So that's coordination. Like, and it's an art. It's what foot you land on, it matters, and then what foot to take off. And at the same time, you're running like full force at this thing because you don't want to half-ass it. Nothing you want to do, the moment you half-ass anything in that ring, there's 2 things that will happen. One, you're putting everybody in that ring at risk. Not only yourself, but the partner who trusts you with their body and your body, because your body's a weapon in there. If you don't know what you're doing, your body can hurt them more than their body can hurt you, because they know what they're doing. And 2, if you half-ass it and you're just kind of like walking to the rope, it takes out the illusion that you're trying to do for the fans that are watching. And it's such a delicate balance. And I'm going to say this again, and I'm going to say this probably several times during this episode. I sucked. So I appreciate it more knowing that I could never get to that level where these, like, I started with a group of people who are all out doing good things now and doing big things and are highly entertaining, highly charismatic, and really good at, like, being ring generals. Because a lot of these guys I started training with, when I return 4 or 5 years later, have to retrain me. So they became that good in 5 years that they had the ability to be like, no, Dace, this is what you got to do. And I absolutely respect all of them. There's not one person I have crossed paths with in the wrestling world that, at least to me, and I'm sure everybody has their own stories, that didn't try to help. Like, I am... And I know you hear the stories, and I know you watch all the stuff on TV, and you hear the podcasts and stuff like that, where people often tell like, oh, well, that guy's a jerk, or he's in it for himself. I was in a group of guys, and I mean a core group of guys, that were training at OTW, and genuinely wanted to see everyone around them succeed, and were very helpful in pushing. And again, I have said this several times on this episode. I was awful. I am not athletic. And they still took the time to try to teach me. They took the time to work with me. A lot of them put me over in a match at some point that A, I probably didn't deserve to go over, or B, like, didn't deserve to be in the ring with them. These guys are really good. And if you just go look at the OTW roster page today, most of those guys are the guys that I started with and or met up again with in 2013, and they retrained me. I digress. So the first night, we're going to, you just run the ropes. Like, that is like 25% of what you're doing that first night is because you have to know how to do that. It's basics. The next basic step is just chain wrestling. Learning the basic things. You don't see it much anymore when it comes to the match, because if everybody went out and chain wrestled, it would be a very boring card to watch. So each match is supposed to tell a story. Even if it's just a one-off match, you're telling a story within that ring. And if everybody went out there and did the same, like, okay, you chain wrestle, then you do this, you do this, you do this, you do this, it's repetitive, and then, okay, maybe after the third or fourth one, if you're lucky, especially in this day and age where attention spans are awful, they're TikTok level, meaning that you have maybe 30 seconds to keep them hooked. That's the type of, like, progression in a match. What I appreciate with OTW and having those guys being able to train me is that they teach you the basics. Because anytime you can throw this in at any point of the match, A, to catch your breath, and B, just to regroup, more or less. I know it's the same as catching your breath, but it's the basics and the fundamentals and stuff that can be used in variations throughout the match to better tell the story. Especially, and that was something else I appreciated too, because within the first couple courses, between the trainers of Jim and Ed, and then the other wrestlers who were helping you out as you went and you're running drills, they often taught you very well how to tell a story. And doing so with athleticism. So there's two key components there. I completely lack the athleticism. I still do to this day. It only got worse with age. I'm not a whine. I'm more like an automobile that you probably should have traded in when you could have got the best value for it. And the entertainment part, which is telling the story with your emotions, with your face, with the way that you react to what's happening to you or happening in the ring. So all that happens. You're learning all this and going through the motions. And I did this for about 5 months, before I got my first match. And a couple of us debuted around the same time. Again, can't say it enough, I suck. So I'm not a leader of knowledge when it comes to wrestling. I'm not a ring general. I am a ring trooper. And like the sacrificial ones that get thrown out there to take some of the bullets to make sure the good guys live. But I got to ref. So I was reffing a lot of matches. And if you go back and watch a lot of the earlier OTW DVDs in 2008, 2009 area, as well as 2013, whenever I'm training, I'm usually a referee. And I think one thing I did very well as a referee was react. And that benefits because I had told you earlier there was two things running simultaneously during this run. I was training to be a wrestler, superstar, sports entertainer, and at the same time I was still furthering my acting skills. I was working with GCC, doing plays with them. I was also working with a place called John Casablanca's modeling agency. I know that when you see this face, that when you see the little title card that comes with this podcast, I'm not a model. I'm not hideous, but I'm not going to be selling underwear. We'll put it that way. But they offered a unique course or curriculum or we'll say curriculum for commercial acting. Now, as I digress a little bit from wrestling, because this is important, because I really feel what I learned at John Casablanca's, at GCC, at Savannah College Art and Design, and even at the early days at Deffert High School with acting, allowed me to tell better stories in the ring and super compensate for the fact that I suck as an athlete at everything. Like, there's not a sport I'm good at all. At all. So we'll just leave it at that. So I'm taking these commercial acting courses, and a lot of the people that I was paired up with were younger than me. And mind you, at the time, I was only like 23, 24, but these guys were like 17, 18, 19. Like, they couldn't go to a bar. I think I was freshly able to go to a bar when I was working there or going through the curriculum. And I took the experience I had from Savannah in high school into this, learned more because commercial acting is clearly different than being on stage. When you're on stage, you're projecting to a large audience. You have to oversell the smallest motions so people in the back row can see it. Same with wrestling. You're selling these hits or the forearms or a body drop, whatever you're selling, you want to make sure the person in the back row can see it on your face as well as like your body. Like you get a hit in the back, you don't just go, oh, and just like don't make any movement. You have your arms spread out, you're screaming like you were just murdered, and you want people to hear that to an extent. Again, you have to know the variations. You don't want to sell a forearm like you just died and then take like a shooting star press onto a table or whatever and then shrug that off. There's variations. Commercial acting, it's all in the face. It's those small movements that you're so used to amplifying for both wrestling and theater have to be scaled down tremendously. That like, okay, just lift your eyebrow. That shows curiosity. Whereas on like the stage, like, what? And that's pretty much how you sell curiosity. Like, oh, what just happened? And even in the ring, like, what's going on? What's going on? You're overselling it. So when you get to commercial acting, it's like, no. Just look to your left. Look to your right. Make a subtle move. Make a subtle hand gesture. Like a hand on the shoulder shows compassion. Hogan in wrestling, when they did the handshake, his friggin' arm was like all the way behind him, and then he brings it in like a shotgun, grabs the other guy's arm, and brings it back in, and they do like a obnoxious handshake. And that's because you're playing to a crowd of 40,000 plus. Commercials, it's like, no, just shake the man's hand. And like, you don't even have to show the handshake. If you just show the motion that you're going for it, it's assumed. So you get to learn the nuances. So I was doing that as I was learning to sell in the wrestling business. And I feel that having both of those exposures helped. Because it's very hard when you're wrestling that, yeah, it's easy to scream, it's easy to hoot, it's easy to holler, it's easy to like roll around, flop around to oversell that type of stuff. But when you get to the next level, or you get to the details, when someone's selling it in their face that they're in pain, yeah, you're grumbling, you're grunting, you're moaning from pain, but the eyes show it, and your brow, and you're squinching your face like you just bit into a lemon. That stuff's kind of harder to get to in a live audience mentality, because again, in the live audience mentality, you're trying to sell to that back row. So I had that going on along with commercial acting, and I feel like that's how I was able to present a character better, which then ultimately helped me present the referee angle better. Now, as a referee, you by no means are the favorite. Unless you're Charles Robinson, who Little Nate gets all that praise because he will sprint from any part of the arena down to the ring with no issue. Or you're Aubrey Edwards that everybody just loves. Or Earl Hebner that takes like the greatest ref bumps in history. You're not a fan favorite. You're just not. Especially when, as you're doing these matches, you obviously miss things. intentionally, non-intentionally, whatever the case may be. That's how you get the other guy, the bad guy, to get the heat. Heat being, the crowd to turn against him. Well, I guess I did this so well, or at least maybe I did it so bad, that as a referee, I was getting, by the end of it, at my referee run, before I had made the turn to wrestler, I was being booed the moment I would come out to ref, which is fun, because being a bad guy is, like, being hated is so much more fun than being the one who is loved. So I was able to feed off that. I made a couple questionable calls. I know there was one match I screwed up, and I still remember that match and still feel bad for it today, because they were battling on the outside, and I'm counting the 10. That was not how it was supposed to end, and I counted the 10 and rang the bell because, again, you don't want to ruin the illusion. I also was newer to refereeing. Probably could have slowed my count down. I guess I could have been louder. I feel like I was yelling. It was also 12 years ago, so I don't know exactly how it went down. But that incident where I ended up cutting a match short, which sucks for the performers. I sincerely apologize to all of them. I think I did the day of. I know I was like frantic because you took away their time to perform. And again, I started with this telling you how much performing is like an adrenaline high you would never experience. It's amazing. I've never done drugs, but I assume that's what drugs feel like. So I did that, and that didn't go over well with the crowd. And then we were able to turn that into an angle. I remember I was reffing a match, and Jim Monalou came out, and he pokes me with the kendo stick and says, "You better call it right, or I'm going to come in here, and I'll call it right." And he pushes it against my chest, pushes me back, and I'm selling it like, what do you mean? I call everything fair. Until that night, when I didn't call it fair. And ultimately get the crowd to hate me. And that was my transition into being a wrestler. My first match was with a guy named Greg Hoja. Phenomenal athlete. Made me look like $1 million, even though I was probably worth like 20 pesos. And then my favorite part of this was after getting done having the match with him, which I lost, but I had a bunch of people there. People were going ecstatic, nuts. Everybody was behind the dace. They let me be the dace man. I thought that was fun. They let me be who I wanted to be. I was the dace man, the bad referee, but I got to be me times 10. And this is why I said I think this is where the dace man kind of began. And we had a battle royale later that night where Greg and I locked up again in the ring. And I'm deaf. I'm going to admit it. This is going to be breaking news for anyone who knows me, but I'm deaf. And he's whispering to me, and I didn't hear what he was saying. But when you're in those type of situations, the veteran is usually, and who would have been a Greg in this scenario, tells you what to do. Like, oh, okay, I'm going to shoot you off. We're going to do this. Or, okay, time for you to go out, whatever. I thought I heard, it's time for you to get out of the ring. And the Battle Royale had just started. And I remember Ed and Jim saying, like, oh, no, you're going to get some time in there. It's your debut night. You just hang in there for a while. You're not going to win it, but, like, you don't have to go first. I went second. But I thought Greg said, all right, time for you to get out. And he's pushing me against the rope, and, I went over the rope. I get back to the ring, and after the show, he's like, dude, why'd you jump out so early? And I'm like, oh, you said it's time for me to go. He's like, no, we had a great match. It was fun. The crowd was behind it. I didn't hear any of that. All I heard was get out of the ring. And those weren't even any words he had used. And he's like, you could have hung in there for a while. We were at a rest spot, man. You just chill there. We could have just kept, like, pushing back and forth. You could have kept struggling like you were going to go, and you didn't go. And then all of a sudden you went. And it's like, well, now who am I going to mess around with? Because then I made it uneven and he had nowhere to go. But I thought it was hilarious because the entire time he's just trying to, and I would learn this better as I was going through matches and got more under my belt, but I thought it was hilarious. I remember telling the story right after that, he's having a conversation with me, telling me I did a good job, and I heard, "Get the hell out of the ring." And just immediately ejected myself out of the ring and walked to the back. And it was just like, wow, that was fun. And I had only been in there for maybe like 5 minutes of the 20 to 25 minutes that were allotted to that Battle Royale, which it sucks for the people who came out to see my debut. They saw my 8-minute match, and then they were going to get the bonus of me in the Battle Royale. And then I yeeted myself out of the ring for no reason. I didn't have to go, but I did. So yeah, that was fun. I always thought it was interesting, that story of how I'm deaf and how bad I am. But the initial run would go for a little bit while, and it was awesome. Just that night, that adrenaline rush, that I can't explain it, and it still sticks in my mind. I don't remember much from my past, but I remember that night. I remember who went. I remember who was there supporting me. I remember the t-shirts that my friends had made to wear. I remember the first night of meeting people there. It was a blast. Crazy fun. And I loved doing it. It got me motivated, revved up, and I kept coming back. Eventually, I was working the show. I wasn't a ref anymore. The new trainees started taking over the referee spots. I was doing matches every Saturday. Able to bounce around, taking a lot of losses. But again, who cares? It's fun. You're out there. You're having, to me, this was fun. I get that a lot of people see this as like a livelihood, and I know we can come off disrespectful on my end because I'm just doing it for fun. But I loved it. I loved it so much, being in front of a crowd, bouncing around, and listening reactions. And when we get to, hopefully, an episode down the road when I'm talking about later years of my sports entertainment runs or wrestler runs, I got better at working the crowd with less, which is a story for another day. But this, I wrestled for about 9 months, and then I ran into a situation, or not even a situation, I ran into an opportunity to take a job and make it a career. And what maybe we'll probably talk about it down the road as well as an episode, is that I ended up joining an SAP project that would allow me to travel for the company, install software across all our distribution centers, which obviously is going to cut into the training time. And if you got to train, you got to be there, you got to run through the drills. I knew the bare minimum, and I knew I wasn't great at the bare minimum, and I was doing very basic matches, and most of the stuff I was doing was just like bumping and feeding and not actually delivering moves. So if there was ever going to be a moment that I would have a run at like any title, tag, intermediate, or heavyweight, you can't do that and be as untrained as I was. I was lucky and thankful that I was able to actually have matches, because matches do help you learn better, but you don't get better unless you run drills. It's just a fact. So I got put on the road for this project and spent a lot of time up in Montreal, and my first run would fizzle out. I was a heel the entire time, so I was always with the bad guys. Never got a good chance to run with the good guys in that scenario. Which was fun. I told you, I loved being the bad guy. It's easier to get people to boo you. So if you want a challenge, go be a good guy. Be a good guy, get cheered, and not lose that momentum. That's a bigger challenge than being a bad guy. You can easily get people to hate you. People will hate you for the smallest things. It takes a lot to get them to like you. So I did that. I did some tag teaming. I was a part of like a flamboyant cowboy tag team, which I wasn't good looking enough. So I don't know how I ended up in that, but I did. I had a hair versus hair match. I will admit the hair of the other guy was his beard, of which he ended up shaving 2 weeks later. But I had to cut my hair for the project, so it had to go. And, you know, I don't know if this was their first hair versus hair match in OTW. I doubt it. It's my fault. I didn't think about bringing a pair of scissors, but they only had the children scissors. that you use in kindergarten and pre-K. So they hacked at my hair like hard. Like I want to say by the end of it, he ripped most of it out. It wasn't cutting anymore at that point. He ripped it out. And I had my hair cut to the shortest it had been. I think the last time it was that short, I was 4 years old, and that's because my mom messed up my hair. And that was I've only gotten 2 haircuts in my adult life. That was the first. My second was in 2020. It started a pandemic, so I'll never do it again. And it was just, I held on to that hair for a while in a bag and just went, I miss this ponytail. I'd get it back, but it was an adjustment. So I had that hair versus hair match, which was also kind of like the beginning of the end for my first run, because after that, travel got crazy and I couldn't train. And again, if you can't train and if you don't get those reps in, you ain't going to be worth a damn. And I wasn't worth a damn. The fact they put up with me as long as they did, I am thankful. They didn't have to. They did. I really respect these guys, and I want that point to get across. But the next match, one of my final matches in the first run, we were doing a tag team. I was working with the other cowboy guy, who, again, way better looking than I was. Don't know how I fell into that. I was also wrestling in a singlet. Like, I didn't take my shirt off. I've never had my shirt off in the history of me. If you've ever seen me with my shirt off, I don't know how. I don't know how you pulled that off. Kudos to you, because it's very rare that it happens. I dated somebody for 3 years, and I don't think she ever saw me without my shirt on. Anyway, we had a match, and this will be my last story as we wrap things up here on my first run, and I was ultimately my last match, but we did a tag match, and there was a guy named Fuji back then who, admittedly, I would do a similar gimmick when I returned. He was a wild man. He bit people. He rolled around. He was a grunt. He was a brute. Talk to him outside of the ring. Coolest guy in the world. Very articulate. Very intelligent. And I knew he bit people. I knew it. And I just remember, like, I'm not getting bit by a grown man. I can't do it. And my tag partner took so many of those headbutts and bites and stuff like that, because I would just jump off the edge of the ring. It's like, no, I ain't tagging in. I ain't dealing with that. I was a heel. I knew I was on my way out, and I was like, I'm not doing this. There's just no way. I'm not getting bit. That guy hates me. I can't remember his name, but that's fair. He absolutely deserves to hate me because I was a jerk about it. But I did turnarounds fair play, or whatever it's called, turnabout's fair play. I did get mine, because I did eventually have to get in that match. And every time this guy Fuji would tag in, I would tag out. Like, I wasn't dealing with it. So I ran for my partner in the corner, and he jumped off the apron and just had a smirk on his face of like, you're getting yours, buddy. And it was just like, damn it. Because I went through the middle to still try to hit him, which is not legal. So even if I did tag him like that, he wasn't going to be in. But it also presented my ass to Fuji to get bit. And I sold that because he bit me. And that was like one of my final moments in my first run with the Monster Factory and Old Time Wrestling. Now, I would be back in 2013 with Old Time Wrestling. They eventually split in between there. And I got to work with some of the guys that I worked there with, Brian Johnson, Mick Drake, Eddie Hawkins, a lot of these guys that were coming in. Mick and Brian were there before I had gotten there, but they were still there when I came back. Brian actually got me back into it, and thank God, because I had even more fun on that second run. But I thought it would be interesting that after talking in the first episode of some really serious topics, to talk about some fun topics. How I got my ass bit by a wild man. Eventually, you'll hear down the road, I became said wild man and started biting asses. How I lost my hair the first time in a hair versus hair match because I had to get a haircut for work, and I cut it so short I didn't like it. Photos exist. I implore you to never go find them. It's awful. I look like a douche. I hate it. I have a fat face. It was awful. And then basically how I became from referee to wrestler, and how I eliminated myself from a battle royale because I can't hear well. And that was my first run at OTW, as Chris the Dace Man Dace. The referee, of course, but Chris the Dace Man Dace making his debut. And I hope you enjoyed that journey down memory lane as much as I did. I look forward to talking to you guys again next week. And make sure you check out everything over at Basement Protocol Productions. So, I don't have a catchy outro. I'm not going to keep doing that. I'm not pushing this. I'm just talking. I hope you enjoyed this chit-chat session with me and this little peek into a Dacetacular Mind. See you next time.